Hello my friends, I hope you're having a lovely day, and in today's video I'm going to do something I haven't done in a while. I'm going to do a rebuttal video. I've done a few of these, and I only ever do them when I really feel like there's something for me to offer up. And I do with this instance. We're talking about a Wall Street Journal article that popped up earlier in the week and became a bit of a meme actually. It was about Fortnite and technically video games in general versus the imagination of a child and stuff like that, and became the talk of the town for a few days. I'm finally having a chance to really dig into it and give my counterpoint for the video. Now, I'm never out to bash or belittle people with these features. I just always feel like it's important to offer another perspective and try and do so in a level-headed way. So the author of this Wall Street Journal article is Mike Kerrigan. I'm not out to bash him or be mean or anything like that, but like I said, he put out his article. It's a Wall Street Journal article. It's going to reach a very large audience. I have very little doubt that mine won't go anywhere near as far as his did, but I still feel it's important to offer up a counterpoint, so that's what I'm going to do. The title of the article is A Young Imagination Beats Video Games, and I just really dislike when people are like, this thing beats that thing. I don't know why we have those discussions. I don't know why people get anything out of that. It's pointless, it doesn't get us anywhere, but that's for a different video. My real issue here is with the notion that imagination somehow is stifled by video games, and I would say, as someone who's played video games, that couldn't be any further than the truth. And I think most people would feel that way as well, as long as they've played video games. Yes, we play games that are filled with characters and game worlds and mechanics and storylines, but that doesn't mean there's no imagination involved. Especially when you stop playing and you take a break or you really enjoy a game, you imagine all sorts of scenarios about things that don't happen in the game. You may have made a decision in a game that didn't play out well, and you're like, oh, I wonder what would have happened if I did this differently, and you imagine how things could have changed in the story. You imagine what would happen for characters if they met different characters along the way. There's games that are filled with little tiny bits of lore for races of characters that we never get to meet, and fans imagine what those are like and how they could play into the series going forward and what they might look like and sound like, and that's all kinds of imagination. And then when you add in friends to the mix, friends talk about games together all the time, and you're like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if they would add this in and then you could do this thing? That's imagination. You are imagining what could happen going forward for that franchise. Imagination is a huge part of games. There are countless YouTube channels that are dedicated to analysis of video games and taking tiny bits of information and trying to piece together things that could happen. And a lot of that uses imagination to see where things could go. There's all kinds of fan fiction out there that obviously is imagination. There's all kinds of fan art out there that uses imagination to show how characters might look in a different style or how characters might look in a different game or whatever it may be. Imagination is a huge part of not just making video games, but playing video games as well. So the little subtitle here is Fortnite doesn't hold a candle to my boyhood games of Fortnite. I'm gonna gloss over the terrible pun and we'll continue on. He says, my two youngest sons, Finn and Jack, love the online game Fortnite. The 10 and 8-year-old brothers would play it long enough to grow roots through the floor if my wife and I let them. The pull of the game is that strong. I feel sorry for them, but not because Fortnite doesn't seem fun. It just can't be as entertaining as the real thing. By real thing, I don't mean the combat featured in the game. I mean a memorable activity from the summer of 1980 when I was 9. I mean quite literally Fortnite. What's the one thing that stands out to you in that blurb? For me, it was that it seems like Mr. Kerrigan has never played Fortnite, and I don't think it's fair for someone to say that thing can't be as good as the thing that I liked because they've never done the other thing. I mean, unfortunately, people do that all the time. They're like, oh, this hobby I enjoy so much better than your hobby, and the other person will say, well, have you ever done it? And they'll be like, no, I haven't done it, but I've seen enough about it. I know what it's about. Well, that's not good enough for me. That doesn't count. You have to at least give it a shot. And you would think Mr. Kerrigan would want to do that, A, because he's writing the article, but B, more importantly, his kids are really into it. So he says his kids play it all the time and it's hard to pull them away from the game. So they're having fun, they're doing it often, and Mr. Kerrigan is obviously struggling with it somewhat. So you think he'd be like, you know, my kids are really into this, maybe I should give it a shot and see if something's there. But it doesn't seem that he has played it. I can't guarantee that, but he says, I feel sorry for them because not because Fortnite doesn't seem fun. You wouldn't say that statement if you had played the game. You'd have a more definitive stance. You'd say, Fortnite's not fun, or I didn't find Fortnite to be fun. He says, Fortnite, it's not because Fortnite doesn't seem fun. So I just wish Mr. Kerrigan would have given the game a shot at least before saying, like, my kids are playing it and they really like it, but boy oh boy, my Fortnite nights were so much better than this. Mr. Kerrigan goes on to describe the summer nights that he had with his childhood friend, where they'd go get sugary drinks and then they'd race their bikes back to the friend's house for a sleepover, and they'd turn the living room into like a makeshift fort and pretend to be Jim Bowie and Davy Crockett, stuff like that, you know, all kinds of stuff that involved imagination, obviously. After painting that picture, Mr. Kerrigan goes on to say, "With nothing but a couch, a bedsheet, a broom, and a t-shirt, we reveled in the wonder of boyhood. Our joy was pure because it flowed directly from the indispensable and most precious thing a child possesses, imagination. It's a simple reminiscence, but one that delights me more the older I get. We adults, in failure of imagination, have forgotten how to build forts." I think that last line from Mr. Kerrigan is very telling, the one where he says, "We adults in failure of imagination have forgotten how to build forts." I know, you know, he's not specifically saying all adults have forgotten how to build forts. He's talking about adults have forgotten how to imagine things or use their imagination. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's almost like a Peter Pan story, which is a story. It's not true. But I don't know why there's this idea that adults have just lost their sense of imagination, or perhaps they, you know, as you're moving into adulthood, you have to do away with imagination because you're participating more in the real world. I don't get it. I don't understand why that's a thing. Obviously, millions of people do not do that and still function as adults, and they manage to get by just fine. So I don't know why some adults are like, oh, I don't have the imagination that I used to. Well, that's because you gave up one day, and you don't have to give up to become an adult. Giving up your imagination does not make you an adult. It's just a decision that you made at some point. We have millions of adults that have very vivid imaginations that create amazing things today that other millions of people enjoy. Like I said earlier, TV, music, movies, video games, all that stuff uses imagination without a doubt. The people that are coming up with that stuff have been inspired in countless ways and are imagining a whole universe to share with people. So it seems like Mr. Kerrigan has lost his imagination and he's kind of upset about it, but he's hoping that his kids don't play as much Fortnite and do this stuff that he did as a kid, because he's like, oh, your imagination's gonna disappear, or it's not gonna be what it used to be. And that doesn't have to be the case. That leads me to a point where I'd love to talk about a quote, and there's no way to talk about it without sounding pretentious. Hopefully you know that I'm not pretentious, but I mean, it's how it's going to come across. That's the only, if somebody's like, well, I have this quote, that's just the way it sounds. So hopefully at least the quote will speak for itself. But this conversation of imagination and adulthood and growing up and moving on and stuff like that, I have so many friends and family members who worry about that stuff, about like, am I too old to be playing video games? Am I too old to be doing this, that, or the other thing? You know, and I'm talking about things like I said, playing video games or reading comic books or whatever it may be for entertainment. And I always say to them, as long as you are doing your adult duties, like taking care of your family, going to work, making your money, paying your bills, being a good person in general, and whatever you're doing isn't out to actively hurt you or someone else, then it's fine. Enjoy it. There's nothing wrong with that. Anything you do that shirks your adult responsibilities is not good, but it's not good because you're pushing aside things that should be done, that need to be done. So it doesn't matter what you would be doing, playing video games or, I don't know, reading a book, let's say. If you're doing those instead of doing your adult responsibilities, then that's a problem, but it's not a problem of the entertainment form that you're choosing. So that leads me to the quote, which comes from C.S. Lewis, and like I said, it's really important to me. I keep it on my phone because I like to remind myself of this from time to time. I'm going to read you the quote. I won't read you the whole thing because it's very long, but I'll read you the most important snippet. To be concerned about being grown up, to admire the grown up because it is grown up, to blush at the suspicion of being childish, these things are the marks of childhood and adolescence. In childhood and adolescence, they are, in moderation, healthy symptoms. Young things ought to want to grow, but to carry on into middle life or even into early manhood, this concern about being adult is a mark of really arrested development. When I was 10, I read fairy tales in secret and would have been ashamed if I had been found doing so. Now that I'm 50, I read them openly. When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up. I love that quote. I really do think it applies here a lot because, as I said, Mr. Kerrigan seems like he's just given up on his imagination, and he gave up on it long ago. And it also seems clear to me that he misses it because he wants to make sure his children use their imaginations while they're young and get the most out of it. Unfortunately, though, he believes that Fortnite can't play into imagination at all, and they need to get out and do the exact same things that he did. Go out and play with friends in real life and go, make believe forts and houses, and all that's fine. That's great. That stuff is fun. I did that too, without a doubt. But it's not like one thing is better than the other. They're all going to provide different ways of activating your imagination. So, yeah, why not do all of them? If you don't want your kid playing Fortnite 6 hours a day, that's fine. I get that. So take them off the Fortnite whenever and let them do what they want to do. You could say like, hey, why don't you go out and play with your friends? Or hey, why don't you go out and do this or whatever. But to say that Fortnite isn't playing into their imagination in any way, I think fundamentally misses part of what the video game experience is all about. Mr. Kerrigan wraps things up by saying, I hope my boys never lose sight of life's simple joys. I hope someday they have their own stories to tell and look back as fondly on their childhood as I do mine. But for that to happen, they'll need to play less Fortnite this summer and more Fortnite. Now, man, that last paragraph really irks me a lot. He's saying if they're not going to lose life's simple joys and have wonderful stories to tell, they have to stop playing Fortnite, and I have to go out and do what he did. Like, everyone's path through childhood is different as far as when it comes to entertainment and what you do for fun and stories and things like that. Someone could do the exact same thing that Mr. Kerrigan did and hate it. Someone, for all we know, his friend that did it didn't have fun or doesn't remember it being as fun as Mr. Kerrigan does, or it doesn't mean as much to him, or it means something completely differently. Everyone is different. And for Mr. Kerrigan to say Fortnite is not what you should be doing, that's not how you have enjoy simple things in life, and that's not how you have memories and stories to tell going forward. You have to go out and build forts and have to whatever, all the things that he said. I just think that's so short-sighted and so silly. The world changes every day. There's always new things to experience, and there's always new games to play. Game players certainly know that. So Mr. Kerrigan doesn't have the experience of growing up with video games. It seems that, video games might have been around, but they didn't really become like a real thing until, I'm guessing he was a little bit later on in life, so he missed that part. So for him to say his kids have to experience things the way he did, ignores the fact that they're experiencing something that he didn't ever get to be a part of. So his children may have wonderful memories that he just can't relate to, but that doesn't mean that they're wrong. I know I have plenty of great memories of playing outside with my friends, and I have plenty of great memories of playing video games with friends too, be it online or locally. I mean, years and years ago, back when I was in my teens, we were having LAN parties with friends. I would lug my giant desktop tower over to a friend's house and we would play Unreal Tournament together. And it was fantastic. We had so many laughs and so many great games. And so we have so many stories that we still talk about. And one of the friends that I played with, I just saw the other day, and we were saying how we have to get back together and do that again because it's such a great memory. It's such a fun time. It wasn't just we're playing a game. It was all of us enjoying something together at the same time, being somewhere together, experiencing the same thing. We had victories, we had losses, we had laughs. It was a moment. It was so much fun. And there were so many years there where we did that, but then we became adults and we didn't have the time to do that stuff. And we didn't have, people move and people have children, so there's not as much time to do that stuff. But we still make things happen through online gaming like you do in Fortnite. And it doesn't happen as often as we'd like, but it still happens. and it's wonderful. So I think for his kids playing Fortnite now and, you know, building those relationships with friends online, or just between the two brothers building relationships like that, I'm sure that's going to take them forward in some really interesting ways. I have no doubt that later on in life, those two brothers are going to be like, hey, remember when we used to play that game together and all the fun we had? Man, that was great. We should probably do something like that again. And, you know, that's their Fortnite. Mr. Kerrigan's Fortnite was actually building forts, and his son's Fortnites are playing the game Fortnite. And neither is wrong, neither is right, they just are. Both provide fun, both help imagination, and both will stick with them for years to come. That wraps Mr. Kerrigan's article, and that wraps my discussion of the article, and a little bit of a rebuttal on the whole idea. And I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure it ended up being a bit rambling and too long, but this is the part where I'm like, I should just delete the whole thing and forget about it. And sometimes I do. I've done that with plenty of projects before. Record hours of stuff and then delete it. But who knows? Maybe you're watching this one on YouTube right now and it made it through. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree or disagree or see a completely different train of thought there. I'd love to know. But that is today's video, and I will see you tomorrow with something. So until then, thanks for watching, liking, subscribing, and commenting. It's very much appreciated. And enjoy the weekend. Have a great time. Play some games with friends and family. Hang out. Make some memories. Use your imagination. You deserve it. I'll see you in the next few hours.